Hi, and welcome to Building Out a Website from Scratch. My name is Lawrence, and I'm going to be your instructor for this course. So within this course, we're going to be taking you and showing you how to build a website from scratch. Starting out with a default HTML template, we're going to write out all of the source code needed in order to create a website just like the one that you see in front of you right now. So this website is going to be fully mobile ready, fully responsive. It's going to be a single page website, and also it's going to be a really nicely laid out website. So we're going to go through how to set up the contact form, how to set up a product section with a number of different items as products, also about, contact, home, and a header section, including how to add these background images and everything you need in order to build out a website. Also adding in social icons like the ones we've got here at the bottom. And this website is going to be a single page website where we're able to navigate using the different navigation icons here, navigation menu here at the bottom. And notice that whenever we scroll to a different page, it automatically activates that page as setting it as active. So we can either click down and we can activate the page, or when we scroll down we see that we're actually going through different pages and we see that the navigation bar is responding to that as well. So we've got the same website just over here, same similar functionality, and you can get a better look at how this navigation menu is going to work. So all of the source code and resources that we're using within this course are included within the course, so you too can follow along and create websites just like the one that we're presenting in this lesson. So when you're ready, let's begin writing out a website and creating a website from scratch. In this course, we're going to be building out a single page sticky footer website from scratch. And in this lesson, I want to go over some of the resources that I'm going to be starting with in order to create the website. So first of all, I've got an editor open here. So this is Brackets.io. So this is a free product from Adobe. If you already have an editor, you can go ahead and use that. If you want to follow along with what I'm doing within the course, exactly as I'm doing it, I'm going to be using Brackets. So it's an open source editor you can download, and it works essentially the way any other editor would work. So if you want to check that out, it's available at Brackets.io. And what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be starting out with an HTML template here. So this is just a standard HTML5 template where we're specifying the doc type. We've got our opening HTML tag specifying the language. We've got our head sections. We've got some meta information in here. And this one here is an important line where we're setting the viewport. This is going to allow us to create our website to scale on mobile devices or on smaller screens. And we've also got a link here to our style sheet. So this saves us the trouble of actually having a whole bunch of styling information here within our HTML document, and essentially separates out the styling from the HTML. And we've linked it over to style.css, same folder as index.html, the file that we're using to create our HTML. So what we can do is now we can type into style.css and have the styling properties come out onto the web page. Standard body, open and close, and then closing off the HTML. So this is our standard template that we're starting with, and we're going to build the website out from here. Some of the other resources that we're using within the course, so we're going to be using, our browser is going to be Chrome. So this is an example of what we've got open here, and essentially we don't have anything yet within our web page. We're going over to localhost. So if you might have seen that we are going to localhost. So I'll show you how you can actually set up localhost as well on your own system. Although in this course, we're only going to be going over HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and all of this runs directly in your browser. But if you are curious how to get localhost or a local machine running on your computer, you can check out XAMPP. So this is at apachefriends.org. I download XAMPP for Windows, Linux, OS X, and I simply have it running in the background so that I can go over to localhost. And what it's doing is it's essentially simulating an Apache server running on my system, and it's simulating what I would be getting output from a web host. So all it does is you just do an install and then you start it. You only need Apache. You can start up MySQL if you're starting a database, FileZilla, and there's a bunch of other options. There's configuration options and a lot of really cool stuff in here. So as I said, you only really need to have a browser. So the browser that I'm using is Chrome, and the really nice thing about Chrome is it's got these dev tools here. So I've got it in a separate window popping up, and this gives me the ability actually to toggle the different devices. So when I'm designing for mobile, I can really easily see what my website is going to look like on an iPhone 6, or I could set the dimensions of my screen size that I want to work with. And this is just a great way to really quickly see and get some information about how your website is being displayed and rendered out, and it's going to be very useful when you're fine-tuning your CSS. Some of the other resources that I'm using within this course, so I'm going to be using some placeholder source files. So I'm using Placeholder for some images, Lorem Pixel for images, and I'm also going to be generating some Lorem Ipsum text. So there's a number of these different generators online. So we're going to be doing that. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to better design our web pages, because it's going to give us the ability to add in placeholder content. And what that essentially does is make your website look like a real website without actually having to have all the assets in place. So Placeholder, Lorem Pixel, and there's a bunch of these online. So you can, again, depending on if you already have your assets, you can actually put your real assets into your website design as well. Some of the other resources that we're using within this course. So we're going to be using jQuery, and in order to access jQuery, you can go over to the jQuery website, or you can get one of these hosted libraries. So I usually prefer to use Google's hosted libraries, and as you can see here, they have a whole bunch of hosted libraries, and this gives us access to the jQuery library, which essentially is a JavaScript library, which gives us a whole bunch of really nice interactive functionality within our web page elements, our HTML elements. So it really makes a nice quick connection, saving quite a bit of coding that you could do anyway in JavaScript, but it would just take you more time, and it's not as intuitive as jQuery. So this is why we're going to use jQuery as our preferred way of creating dynamic interaction. Another thing that we're going to be using in the course is Google Fonts. So these are Google Fonts available at fonts.google.com. Whole bunch of fonts to choose from, and it's another quick way to have access to 808 different font families. You can sort through them, you can pick different styles, and really fine-tune and select out the font that you want to use. And lastly, some of the other resources that we're using. So we're going to use Wireframe CC to quickly do a drawing of what we want our website to look like. This is going to be a single page website, so there's actually probably not a lot that we're going to be doing within the planning, but it's always a good idea when you're designing your website to create a blueprint or a rough sketch of what you want your website to look like, and it's really going to help you out with how you can section off the different pieces of your HTML structure in order to apply CSS more effectively. And also, I'm going to be using CodePen.io. So essentially, CodePen.io is a place where you can type in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and see it rendered out immediately within your within the display area. So if you type in HTML, you see it showing up here. Type in CSS, showing up here. And this is a really helpful tool when you're designing your web content, because it does give you the ability to, again, fine-tune that. So you can see that the alert is already showing up. So I was just demonstrating that JavaScript works in the same way. Whenever you start typing it, it automatically renders and shows it up. So again, this really does help you fine-tune your coding, because you get to see what it looks like in real time right away. You don't have to switch any pages. It's all available online. So you just need to jump over to the website and create a new pen. So I believe they have a button up here to create a new pen, and you can create a free account there. With free accounts, they share it publicly, and whenever you create your project, you can save it, or you can pay for the premium account to save private code and pens. So now that we've got all of this out of the way, Let's start creating our website in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to go through how we can create a basic wireframe, a rough sketch, blueprint of what we want our website to look like. So I'm going to be using a tool here at wireframe.cc, and essentially this gives me the ability to quickly sketch out and draw up a wireframe of my website and how I want it to look. Now the idea here is that we see that we've got these grid lines, and we can really fine tune to how we want the different sections of our website to show up within the grid lines. And of course there's a lot of options to create your wireframe, so you can even use it in Photoshop or a number of different applications that are available there. So depending on what the purpose of your website is, so if you are actually doing a website for clients, then do take some more time, really spend some time drawing out this the wireframe of the way that you want to present the website. Make sure that that the wireframe is consistent to how you can design your website and all the different sections and so forth, and then present it to the client. So in this case, we're going to be drawing out a really simple plan. So let's begin, and this is going to be a rough sketch. You could also do this with a pen and paper. You don't have to even open up a computer to roughly sketch out the way that you want your website to look. And essentially, because this is a one-page website, we're going to have all of the content visible with the different sections of the website. So this will just simply represent different sections, and the idea here is going to be that users scroll down between all the different sections, and we're going to have a scroll bar that's going to move alongside with it. So we're going to have a sticky footer scroll bar at the bottom, so I'm going to create that one there, and it may or may not. So the sticky footer is actually going to be fluid navigation bar. Maybe we'll make it black so it really stands out. So depending on the size of the screen, this may or may not be adjusting. So I'm going to just make a quick fix there so I've got it within the grid lines. And so we're going to present our navigation menu there, and this content over here, this isn't going to have a border around it. So depending on the size of the screen, it may fit 100% with the navigation bar, or it might be smaller if it's on a really large screen, or on the smaller screens at the certain breakpoint that we set, it's going to be 100%. And then down here is where we're going to add in the different maybe we'll do some text here. So we'll have our home page, we'll have products. I make this a little bit bigger, about me section, and contact. And turn this to white, make it wider, bring it down. So this just gives us a rough idea of what we want, how we want our website to present. And let's just edit that text. I think I got a line break in there. So we want it to show up on the same line, so roughly like that, but we are going to add in some additional spacing in between these so that it'll space out nicely, and it'll look like actual button areas. So a rough idea of how we want it to present, maybe have it a little bit more towards the top, and as the user scrolls down the website, they're going to always be presented with the sticky menu, so they're going to know which section of the website they're on. So these can actually even highlight in the background. So I think I'm going to have that like that, and then I can add in some text afterwards as well. Maybe we'll make the text so this will be home, and the idea here is that this is going to show up, so depending on the section that they're on, it'll be blocked like that. Products, the same thing, so they're going to actually know where they're looking at. So really simple, straightforward design, and then we're going to have a number of sections, so home, products, about, and contact, and then we'll probably have a footer at the bottom as well, and maybe even a header at the top when the user comes into the web page and gets the first glance at your website content. So now that we've got our rough sketch ready to go, let's go ahead and start adding code and building out this website. In the last lesson, we built out what we wanted our website to look like in a wireframe, and now we're ready to start opening up our editor and actually creating our HTML structure. So this website is going to be fairly straightforward. We've got a few main content areas. So we're going to have a navigation bar, which we're going to place sticky at the bottom there, and we're going to have several sections of content. So we might also have a header and a footer. So essentially this is going to give us 6 sections, but within this main scrollable section, and the navbar is just going to be a section on its own, just because that this gives us the ability to place and position the navbar, and we don't want to wrap it within the rest of these 6 sections because we want this to be fixed width, so going up to a matter of so we're going to add a wrapper around there or a container there to hold all of that content, all of those sections within there, and this is going to be an entirely separate one. So we're going to start out with essentially 2 parent pieces of HTML structure. So the first one would be where we're going to house our nav, and maybe we'll just create a div there to hold on to our nav content, and then within there we've got our nav element, and the nav is going to be built within an unordered list, and we're going to present a number of list items. So usually, typically this is the way it's done, but we don't actually have to do it this way. This is an optional way of doing it, and maybe actually to do something a little bit different, let's just do them as hrefs. And in order to demonstrate that there is a number of different ways that we can actually control and set these this scrolling up. So the first one is going to go to hash index and close that off, and this is just the home section, even though the whole website is going to be a home, so maybe it makes more sense we just call it accordingly to the section. And our next section that we're looking at is about, and we'll just give it an uppercase about. And we had another one where we had products. So we might have to move these around so that we can see how that we're presenting them within the website. And then lastly, we're going to do contact, because you always need to have a contact section for people to be easily able to contact and connect with you on your website. So I'll just save that. So that's our nav section, and we're going to create another div, and this is going to contain all the different sections of our web page. So we're going to start out with a bunch of sections. We can also do a header in here as well if we want. So that could be a default starting area for our web page. So let's add in some content here. Welcome to my website. So just a quick welcome message. And then within the first section, let's create an H2 there and add in. We might want to actually have a container around there, so I'm going to do an article. And then within that article, so this gives us another main container where we can add in some additional styling options. And this is going to be useful because if we want to wrap around and have specific background for within the section there where we've got our actual content, this is where we can differentiate and add in that background color. So typically we might have a whole background for the section, and then we have another element here floating within there, and this is where our content is going to sit. And I'm going to add in some placeholder content as well as we're developing this. So I'm going to give this one an ID of home so that we can identify it, and I'm going to just copy and paste and do 4 more, so 1 for about. And we're going to update this content as we go through the lessons. So products and contact. And then we have to make corresponding IDs to all the different sections. And that was just brackets, auto formatting. And then maybe let's just add in a footer as well. And this is where copyright, info, contact, map, whatever, about the company. So typically you would have this type of content there at the bottom. So all of this now is within this div. The first div is our navigation menu, and essentially this is all we really need to do in order to create the structure of our website. So we can actually now go out to the web page and take a look at the way that's going to look. So I've got a few of these that are open, so I just wanted to close these down, and let's take a look at our website. So now when we refresh it, well, it doesn't look like much yet, but we are going to be adding all the styling and all the functionality. Also bring this navigation menu down as sticky on the bottom. So all of this is coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, I want to update our HTML to actually make it look more presentable and make it look a little bit more like an actual web page. So now we've just got our section headers here and blah blah blah. So let's add in and generate some lorem ipsum text. So lorem ipsum is a standard way of creating some meaningless text and adding it into your web design. So it actually looks like real text, but I believe it's pseudo-Latin text used for web design, as they've got a definition down here as well. So we can also randomly add check marks. So I'm going to be using a generator at lorem ipsum info, and from here we can generate out our different text. And we can, the nice thing about here is that we can add in our HTML code. So some of them, they don't allow you to do that, and if your editor, you can copy and paste it within the display area, then that'll work. But if you're not able to do that, then you got to make sure that you have a generator where you can do HTML text. So let's cut down a little bit on the paragraphs and generate out some of this text. So we can also adjust this so maybe that's pretty good. Open up where we had original blah 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 and just post in. So it's not actually adding in those HTML. So this is one of the problems here. So I'm actually going to switch to a different generator. I'm going to use actually blind text generator because that one wasn't actually adding in the HTML that I needed. So this one can generate different characters and so on. And we'll do it in a few paragraphs here, 300 characters. So we see here we've got the paragraph tags, and that's what we were looking for, generating out that text. So I'm going to add in that. I'm going to generate it out for a few of the other sections. So maybe this one has less paragraphs, but maybe some more words. So let's copy this one out. And I usually, obviously I could just copy and paste the same ones, but I like to have some variation of the content that I'm posting. And within products, we'll do an unordered list there and do a bunch of list items. And I'm going to pop in some images here. And I could use lorem pixel, so maybe that one is a good one. Lorem pixel doesn't always load very quickly, so that's why I usually prefer to use placeholder, but lorem pixel looks just so much better. So let's use lorem pixel for all the different images. And I also do want to get a variety here, so I might want to use different slashes there. So we've got cats and city and people. So let's try that out and see how this turns out. So now we can do cats for one list item, and when I save it, it's going to drop that down. And I want to have a number of different items here. So we've got city, we had people, And I think the last one, maybe we can do animals. So I have quite a variety of different images that are going to be showing up there. And then over here within the contact area, so this could just be like a standard contact form. And then within here we've got our form. So fix that up. And then first one, we've got our input type equals, should be text there. And next input type is going to be an email. So we're going to be expecting an email there. And then lastly, we can just do button type equals submit. Create a submit button. Send email, close off the button. So actually, brackets already took care of that for me. So let's save this and take a look and see what our page looks like now. So now it looks, we've got an extra bracket there, closing bracket, but it generally looks a little bit better, like we've got some actual content within the page. So we're ready to start designing out our web page and building out the CSS, adding in styling, and really make it look more like our initial design where we've got our navigation bar at the bottom there. So let's start on that in the next lesson, and that's coming up. In this lesson, we're ready to add styling onto our web page in order to transform it into our original wireframe design. So this means that updating all of these sections and the navigation bar and making it look and feel like the website that we wanted to create right in the beginning according to the wireframe. So let's open up our editor, and we did have to make one adjustment here, removing out that extra bracket. And now we can start applying our styling. So we've already got styling linked in via style.css. So we've got our style sheet, style.css. So let's open up that style.css and start by applying styling to the body and to the HTML. So usually when we start creating styling, we start from the main container. So this would be the main container, the HTML and the body. So we're going to start from that top level element, giving it a height of 100%, so that because this is a one-page website, we want it to go the full height that's available to us. We also want to take care of things like hyperlinks within this section. So we might have a hyperlink here. So it might have a number of different hyperlinks. So let's update that as well. So maybe this is hyperlinking, and we're going to add in some additional hyperlinks throughout our page. So let's take care of the hyperlinks within this section. So typically when we're setting up our web page the way that we want it to look, we would deal with the hyperlinking and the main elements first. And with modern website, you typically don't have a lot of those underlines anymore. So these are, as HTML by default renders out hyperlinks, we see they're blue and underlined. So if you want to apply, really apply some nice styling to it, with modern websites, we usually take out the text decoration. So we'll set it to none to remove out the line, and then give it a color. So this is dependent on what your color scheme is. So for now, maybe I'm going to do just a dark blue there. So not much of a difference, but in order for us to be able to differentiate the hyperlinks out. And next, we need to add in the ability for the users to be able to tell, oh, well, this is a hyperlink because something is happening when I'm hovering over it. So it also makes hyperlinks more appealing and more feeling like that there's something that the user can click. So we're going to give the underline back in, and we're going to give it a color whenever the user hovers over. So we might do something like crimson, so it really does stand out that something is happening, this is something different, and the user can distinguish all of the different hyperlinks. So next thing that I also want to do is update the images, because I want to make the images responsive. So this is where I add in IMG and I do max width, And essentially what this does is this allows us to update, depending on what the container size is, the image width. So if it's actually over the default container size, it's not going to hang over the edges. It's going to take a new value of the default, which is 100%. In the next lesson, we're going to look at the next level of elements within our HTML design and start building those out, applying styling to make them look and feel the way that we want to present them within our web design. So that's coming up in the next lesson. So now that we've applied some basic styling onto our website, some default styling, we're ready to start taking a closer look at our main sections of our web page and start building out and applying styling to those. So first of all, let's look at the next element, the next major element that we encounter, and that's this div. So I'm going to give it an ID of Navbar so that we can easily identify it. And this one, now we can start creating where we want to position that Navbar. So by selecting out ID Navbar, we're going to give it a position, and it's going to be a fixed position, which essentially means that it's not going to move wherever I place it on the page. Doesn't matter where the user scrolls to, it's always going to be sitting there within that page. So let's take a look at that, and right now it doesn't really do anything because I haven't set the parameters. So let's set those parameters. I'm going to give it a bottom pix of 0. So we have options to move it from different edges of the screen. So we've got top, right, bottom, left. So we could typically, if we want it to be the top left-hand corner, so we would do top 0, left 0, and depending on where we want to position it. So I'm going to do bottom 0 so that it fits directly on the bottom. Let's also give it a background color, because in our original design we had a background color of black. So let's add that in as well. I want to display it as a block. So essentially what display block, and I think by default the div would have had that display block anyway, but sometimes it's a good idea to add these in just to make sure that they are actually in effect within the web page, within the design. So width 100, so block and width 100, these would have been by default anyway, but I'm going to add those in just so that we do have the ability to, if we make some changes here, if it's not a div anymore, and so on. So it can just apply it by the ID. So let's refresh the page now. And I'm actually going to switch out these lorem pixel images to placeholder it, just because it just seems like they're taking way too long to load, and it's interfering with our design work here. And then we can swap those out afterwards to be actual images. So placeholder it, and I'm just going to set them all as placeholder. So that way, this way, whenever I refresh the page, it's going to load quite a bit quicker. So we see we've got our navigation menu, so it's fixed position, but it's actually sitting underneath what our visible content, so that's no good. We need to use z-index, and what z-index does is it allows us to position where it's going to be sitting. So if we want it on top of other content, we would need to make adjustments to the z-index. And one other thing that we do need to set with it, we need to set height. So we set its width at 100%. So let's give it a height of 60 pix. So this gives the browser a better understanding of where you want to position that content. So there's our navigation menu, and as we scroll down, we see that it actually doesn't change places. It still sits within that same spot. And this is the effect that we're looking for within our website. So we always have this navigation here fixed at the bottom, and it doesn't matter how much content we're adding in, we can always see it, and it's always going to be visible. And this is going to make it easier. As we can see, there's already built-in functionality with anchors, so it actually already brings the website sections to the correct area, to the visible area, the focused area of the display screen. So even when I click them, we see that it's bringing them in to focus within our web page. So in the next lesson, we're going to continue to build this out and really add some styling and apply some styling and transform this from just these hyperlink looking anchors to actual navigation bar looking menu items. So that's coming up in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to continue to build out our navigation bar. So when we set up our HTML structure, typically you're going to see navigations with unordered lists and lists items. But for this lesson, I want to do something different where I'm just showing you how it works with just the anchor and the hyperlinks here. So this, when we cut down on the amount of elements that we're using within our HTML structure, it also limits to what we can do within our CSS. So if we want to apply different styling to the backgrounds and so on, we could apply that to the parent. But when we don't have any parents to work with, we do get limited. So there are some limitations to doing it this way. But either way, we can still make this fully functional. So now within the navbar, nav anchor, we can start applying some styling to it. So we notice that it's really hard to see on that background. So let's transform it into a much lighter color. I'm going to add in, just to add in that text decoration, because I definitely don't want text decoration showing up within that hyperlink there. I want to display them as blocks. So this will give it a little bit more spacing around it. So I'll just show you what this looks like now when I go out and if I refresh it. So now we've displayed as block, and notice when you put in that displayed block that it actually transforms the order of it. So now we have to add in float left as well. So it transforms it horizontally. And I'm going to just open up CodePen and I'll show you what the what's happening here in real time as we're updating the CSS. So we've got our navbar here that we're working with. I'm gonna just copy and paste that in quickly and get rid of our JavaScript here that I was demonstrating earlier and open up the styling. And so there we go. So we've got our navigation bar here at the bottom. Make this a little bit bigger so it's more visible. And so just to show you what's happening as we're building this out. So when I added in display block, you'll see what happens to our navigation bar. It automatically brings it down there and it actually doesn't look proper anymore. So now we just need to add in float left. And what float left does is it actually brings them back in line within that horizontal feature. We can also add in some padding around the text there so that they're spaced out a little bit better. And we can also do a background color if you want to do that as well. So just so that you can see and distinguish them from the rest of the background. This is totally optional. It's up to you depending on how you're designing. I'm just going to tidy that up and shrink that down because we don't really need to be looking at that right now. So typically with a navigation, maybe that stands out a little bit too much, and I'm going to do it close to a dark color, but we'll do it to be able to distinguish it as well. We can also add in margins if we want. So we could do a margin left and show you how that turns out. So that spaces out all of the different buttons, so that distinguishes them. So this is again a preference depending on how you want to do it. You can also do a width, so predefine your width so that they're all within a certain width. We could do text align and center align the text so that they're actually sitting within the center. So a lot of different options here, and depending on how you want to present it, you could do different options here. You can also do where you've got your first one. So let's say, for instance, I didn't like the way that my margin looked here when I added margin on the left here, it pushed it over. Obviously I could do a margin right, and that would probably fix that. But if you want to add different characteristics, you have the option to be really specific on the elements. So I'm going to switch this back to left and show you how to handle that. So going into I'm going to just copy this value out here, and I'm going to use first child. And so first child is going to be for the first child that's available. So the first one that's sitting in there, I can set a customized background color to it so that we can see which one it is. When I save it, we see it goes blue. We can also apply to the last child. So whenever I save it, it goes blue as well. So this gives us the option if we do want to remove out the margins. So I'm going to update this back to first child, and I'm going to give it a margin of 0. And I got to get rid of that. So we save it, and basically what we're doing is we're canceling it out. So we're giving them all margin to the left 5, but we're canceling out the first child. And this is really useful if you're utilizing just different styling properties. So maybe not as much as the margins, but you have something else that you're working with within the design and that you need to move it over. So that's how you would do that. And there's also another thing with navigation bars is that you typically, whenever you're hovering over the element, you see something happening. So along the same lines as adding in the pseudo styling here, we can also add in a hover on there. So whenever anyone hovers over it, it's going to take these properties. So we can swap out maybe the background color and set it to be white, and set the color of the font to be black. So now whenever we hover over it, we see that we've got this type of effect. And this is more along the lines of our original wireframe, where whenever we're over it, it should be white. So we need to make one more adjustment here, because I want to add in the active class as well. So instead of hover, if it's got a class of active, I want it to take that that value as well. So and we're going to dynamically adjust the class here, adding and removing active via jQuery. So now this particular element has an active class attached to it. And now we can see that it goes white here. So once we've added in that active class, it goes white. And we can add in and remove active classes as needed. So within our HTML. So I'm going to just tidy that up, make it a little bit bigger. So the idea is going to be when we apply our jQuery that we can set different active classes, and we can see that whenever we remove the active class, it goes back to its default colors, and whenever we have the active class, then we get this different look on it. And this is going to be the idea as we're scrolling through the different pages, that we're going to present the different sections within the navigation menu. So the user is actually going to know which section they're sitting on depending on which section is highlighted. And then also they do have the option to hover over them and see the different colors. You can also separate these out as well, so they don't necessarily need to sit within that same properties. So if for hover you had something different, and maybe you didn't want to do exactly a white background, but you want to do an off-white background so that you can distinguish which ones are active still, this is easy to add in and update as well. So now we see that whenever we're hovering over them, they're not exactly going white, but the white, the one that is active is still having a white background. So a number of different options here, and again, depending on how you're styling it. So the next lesson, we're going to continue to build this out and actually build out all of our sections. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy and paste this content back into my editor. So that we can actually take a look at this within our own web page. So I'm going to remove those ones out, open up our page, and we see that now we've got our navigation bar, and everything is ready to go and to fully function as we add in the different sections and make those updates coming up in the next lesson. So that's coming up. This lesson, I want to focus on the different sections. And because this is a single page website, it's important that our sections take up that full available content in order to have the right effect that we're looking for as users scroll through the different sections. So even though some of our sections might not have enough content to fill up the whole web height, we do want to make sure that we can accommodate for this and really bring out that scrolling effect within our web development. So let's open up our editor, and in this lesson we're going to be adding in and updating all of our section content. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this out into, I'm going to copy that whole div out into our CodePen here, and I'm also going to copy out my styling. So actually I don't have anything yet for the navigation bar or the section, so let's start to build that out. So I'm going to just remove out what we were looking at earlier, and the idea here is that I want these sections to take that full width. And we see within our code here that we can identify the sections. So we've got a div here, and maybe we need to give this an ID. So I'm just going to call it main for now, and this is going to allow me to distinguish the different sections. So main sections, and the properties I want to apply to them, so I want to have a minimum height of 100%. So when I save that, we see that there isn't really anything happening yet, and that's because the height of the particular element is taking up that minimum 100%. So we're not actually setting it and relating it to the size of the page. And this is where we need to add in something else to make that minimum height, instead of 100%, we want to make it the visual height. And this is going to relate it to what's available within the browser and essentially give us that ability to bring this out and position this as it would look within a scrolling website. I also want to add in, so I've got an ID of main, and I also want to take care of some other parts with the main section itself. And this is going to essentially acting as a wrapper for our content. And so I want to set it as a maximum width of 1200 pixels because I don't want it always going to the full size. So if there's availability for larger sizes, so I'm going to just shrink that down. I want it only to take up to 1200 pixels. So I'm going to make that big again so we can see the code there. But we noticed that when I shrunk it down, what happened is, so maybe for now, I'm going to shrink it down even more so we can see a demonstration of this. I'm going to give it a border so we can actually see where it's sitting on the page. And ideally what I want to do is I want to have this content centered. So in order to center content within CSS, so container, we do margins. So we could set a 0 top and bottom because we don't want to ideally adjust the top and bottom, but we do want to set an auto value for the left and right. And what auto does is it auto calculates the spacing on the left, auto calculates the spacing on the right, and splits it in two, so essentially centering out your content. We also want to add in some padding here, so we ideally might want to have some padding around all of that content so that it sits in the middle. We might also want to save that padding to the sections, so that's something that we can look at as well, where we could have the different sections have the padding. So there is going to be definitely a difference there. So if we did a background color, so I'm going to just do red so it really stands out, and we do a background color here of blue, and don't worry, I'm going to be removing it. So essentially this is what it's going to look like when we have the background colors, but if we do the padding around there, there is a slight difference on how that content is handled. And this is why I'm keeping the padding within the section, because I want it to relate to the section size, and this is also going to give me the ability to add margins and so on if needed. Now one other thing that I did want to add in is I want to add in position value here for the main section. And the reason being is that I might want to position it according to how my content is being treated. So if I position it relative, this is going to give me the option to put in a top value or a bottom value. And remember, we have that border sitting there at the bottom. So I want to add in a bottom pix of 60 pix. So just to pop it up a little bit, move it up a little bit, so that we can actually interact with that. So bottom, and we're just going to do left at 0 pix, so that it pulls right over to the left hand side. And tidy that up. So another thing that we want to look at and we want to work with is that we did have a different, so we also had main section, but we also had header and footer. So depending on how we want to treat the header and footer, we may or may not want to add 100%. So I'm not going to want to add 100% for the footer, but I might want to add it for the header. So I'm going to just comma separate this out, add in that header there, and so that our header is actually going to take up that full available space. And for the footer, I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to just create a separate property here. I'm going to actually give it a background color to be able to distinguish it from the rest of the content. So I'm going to give it a grayscale type color. So let's bring all of this work into our web project. So I don't think that I changed the HTML, but either case I might have added something in there. So we'll just save that. And now I can add in the CSS as well. So now let's take a look at what our website looks like. So refreshing it, I've got to bring it back down to 100%, and I've got to refresh it again. So you see that we've got welcome to our website, we've got home, about, products, and contact. So now we can scroll to them. But that head section, it doesn't look quite right with it being so long. So I do need to make one adjustment there, and I'm going to take it out of this part here, and I'm going to just separate out the properties for it. And maybe give it a height of 200 pix. And refresh that now again. So now we can distinguish between all the different sections. And just going down here, I just want to make sure I've got a footer there. And for the footer, maybe I want to do a height as well, so it can stand out a little bit more. So now we've got our footer and everything is in place, and it's still compressed, and that's because when we were designing we had set the maximum width of 500. So let's update that back up to 1200, so to make it really stand out better. So ideally we don't want to really have this blue background either, so I'm going to just simply get rid of the background on the main, and I'm going to get rid of the background on here. And we're going to be looking at setting the background properties in the upcoming lessons. In this lesson, I want to update and tweak some of our content that we're presenting within our website. So this is going to be a lesson to kind of do some quick tweaks and updates. So we noticed in the previous lesson that we had set the sections, and just opening up that code pen again, that we weren't really easily able to distinguish between them. So I'm going to add in alternating background colors to the different sections within the web page. And I'm also going to get rid of these default colors here. And I'm going to make this one wider as well. So now we've got a bunch of different sections here. I've got this border around here which I want to get rid of as well. So let's first just tidy that up. And so we don't really have a lot of code left here. So let's update some more of this content here. So I want to separate out the section and the header. So doing a few updates here to what we presented as the code, and then we had a height or a minimum height. And this was 200 pix, and we also had a minimum height down here for the footer section. So now that we've got everything in place, we can add in some section colors here. And we're going to do the same thing that we did in the previous lesson where we had pseudo styling added into it. I'm going to add that in as well. So I'm going to add in styling into every even page. So every even section. And the way that we do that is we do nth child, so much like the first child, last child, we can do nth child, and now we need to specify which one we want to look at. So we're going to just look at the even ones, and here I'm going to add in a background color so that we can distinguish the different sections, see between them. So there we go. So that's essentially, there's what we've got for the different sections to be able to distinguish between them. I also want to really bring these to life by adding in some background images into the sections. So let's go pop back down to here, and I'm going to set some background properties. So these are to background cover. So essentially this, if we do have a background image, it'll cover that entire space. And also I'm going to set the background position, and I'm going to center that position so that the background image is always going to be centered. So we do have an option. I believe by default we're centering anyway, but we do have an option of where you want to position those background images. So this is just in prep for all the different sections. Also, I want to be able to, because I did add in these articles here, and this is going to allow me to break out the different section values here. So I want to put, so for articles, for the article tags, I'm going to add a background color. And for this one, I'm going to use RGB or RGBA and do a white color. And RGBA allows us to set an alpha as well. So that's red, green, black, alpha, so that we can actually see underneath what the content is. And this is ideal if you're adding in background images for older browsers. You should add in the background color RGB anyway, so that it's distinguishable there in case your browser is not updated, and so we can be able to see the text. We're also adding in some padding around there, maybe even a margin for the top. And another one I really like, I love to add in rounded borders, so I'm going to do a border radius, and I'm going to give it a 25 pic border radius. So see that that rounds out those corners. That creates a nice interesting effect for our content areas. And we see that now on the two different content areas, we've got these rounded effects on our content. And even though we can't see it in the about and so on, we can still know that that is available there. So let's continue to build this out and add in some styling for the different elements. So the first one, let's look at, so we've got an ID of home, so we can identify it directly within our CSS. So home, and this is where we can set a background image. And now we need to find an image to place in the background. So URL, and this is where I'm going to use lorem pixel. So let's pop back over to here and copy and paste out some of these image paths if we can. And now I'm going to just paste the image there in the background of home. And give it a second. So there's our image loading nicely, our content nicely on top. So we do have some more options if we want to set for the different values there. So we had used this one. We've got another maybe for the about me as well. We want to put an about there. So we've got our home, we've got about. Save that. So that's with Lorem Pixel, we're doing the same images, so I think that we need to be more specific with the image. So we're going to just do city. We can also set content for each and every page. So we still need to build out the contact form, update that. We need to build out the products list as well. And we need to still do something here with the top part, the home page. So all of this is coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, I want to make some updates. So we've got our content, I've added in the navigation bar, and I noticed that what's happening here, we're not actually able to see the top because we've set a position as relative and we've shifted the bottom to 0. So we can do either of two things. We can set the bottom to 0 pixels so that it positions right at the bottom of the screen. Or if we want, we can use top and we can do top 0 pixels. And that way it'll nicely flow in and set up our header section right off the bat, right at the top. So let's take a look at the products here. So we've got a listing, a bunch of unordered list items here, and I really want to style this quite a bit and present it a little bit better. So we know that we've got it under the products ID. So we can go down here to the bottom. And for products, we can take care of the way that it's being presented. So we have our unordered list and list items. And now we can apply styling to each and every one of those. So let's do a display inline. So if we display it inline, we see they really nicely stack. I'm going to do inline block. There's width, so now we can set default width to them. So if we want them roughly around 1/3 across, we can set them to default width of 30% or even 33%. I'm going to add in a border around it, 1 pixel solid, and we're going to make it a really light border. And I'm going to shrink this down even more. And also give it a minimum height so that they look better in line, so that they're always at least 300 pixels. And this is good if we're adding in some content here. So if I had blah 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 about the product and so on, we can see that now as I go down here, we're aligning and we're setting up a little bit neater. And they're going to better align as we add in some additional content there. So each one of them has the ability to have a little bit of content to really outline it and get them to align much better. So now we're adding in content there. So it's aligning really nicely. And notice that whenever we're resizing, we should actually add in some responsive capabilities as well to this. So that it realigns itself and lines up a little bit better. So let's take care of that by using a media screen. And I usually do the media screens way at the bottom so that we can see that the regular default styling, and then we've got our media screens. So whenever it breaks past this point, I want something different to happen with my styling here. And maybe I'll just set it at 700 pixels. I want them to take up 40%. And just do a height of auto. So save that, tidy that up. And now whenever we're resizing, so now they're stacking, and we're still getting this this bump down here. So let's update that. Let's remove this out, and we know that also with list items we do have some default styling, so we got to get rid of that as well. So we've got those the style types. So let's just remove it out entirely from the UL. So we'll update the margin to be 0. We'll do padding to be 0, and this will get rid of any of those defaults, and list style type, and just set this one to none. So let's take a look at that now and save that over. And let's wait for it to refresh and save it. So I just had to refresh there because for some reason CodePen was lagging in its update. So now we've got a much better looking website. We've got all of these are better aligned, and whenever we resize it, we see that they're stacking nicely. I can also make some adjustments here because I noticed that maybe 40% is not enough, and I could even go higher percentage. Not sure if we can do a full 50 because typically there are some lagging styling cues within here. But it doesn't seem like CodePen's adjusting really well, so we'll probably have to copy this code back into our editor and work with it from that perspective. So the 50% was a little bit too much, so we need to cut that down because there is some default styling as well. So if we cut it down to 48, then that's going to stack it a little bit better, a little bit nicer. We could probably even go to 49 as well and stack it in that way. So let's copy our code back into our editor and see what our website actually looks like. So now we've got all of the HTML code here. So CodePen is a really good resource to utilize, but sometimes it does have its bugs, so it's not always ideal, and there are sometimes occasions when you do have to make some manual adjustments just to make sure that things are working the way that you want it or looking the way you want it. So now this is our website right now, and with lorem images loading in the background. We've got our navigation bar here at the bottom. We've got a product section. So we still need to build out our contact area, and we still need to make some updates to this header to really make it stand out and pop to users as they're coming into our website. So that's coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, I want to update this head section of our website. So typically this could be used as an introduction to your web page, and to bring really people into your website. You could have just different effects and options there. You could have images and so on. So this is essentially my header area, and we're going to make some adjustments to that content within the header. I do need another container there that's going to contain that content so I could float and center it. So this will just be a paragraph about the website and more information. So this is just some more placeholder content. And now I can go down into my CSS and make an adjustment. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to do main header. So I've got main header, and just below that I want to apply some styling to any div that's underneath the header. So for that first div there, I want to add some padding. Maybe I even want to do a border around it. And do a background color. So slight variation off white. You could even do a beige. So let's take a look at the web page now, see what it looks like. And those lorem images are really taking a long time to load. So I'm going to comment these out for now until we finish up with the website project, and then we can bring them back into our web page so that we don't have a slow loading time. So let's update this. So there's our header there. So still needs a little bit more work. We definitely need to add some padding around there to center that content. And maybe quite a bit of padding, so 25 pixels. We can also do border. So border radius to make it rounded in line with the rest of the web page content. And maybe we could even do a background image on it if we want, and so on, or maybe an image. So again, depending on what you want and how you want to present your website. So we also maybe want to make it a little bit higher. So I had set it at 200 pics, so we can maybe do it at 500, so it really stands out there. And so just so that people are aware that there's some additional content. So you could have any number of items here. Maybe we just put an image underneath or an image within it. And this image, I'm going to actually just use the ones we were using before here for placeholder. So I can just copy out this tag here, place it in here, and I'm going to make this one bigger and a little bit higher. So let's see what this looks like now. So this is our image, and maybe we even want to make it even bigger than that. So we're going to have a really nice full-size image in there that's going to scale to 100% as we change different sizes and dimensions of our website. So there we go. So now we've got our welcome to my website, about the more information. We've got all of our different sections outlined here. We've got the products. So let's finish this off, update the contact area, and then add in our JavaScript or our jQuery to really make it dynamic and functional. But as we can see, just the HTML already gives us the ability to flow through the different pages, but of course we don't have any way to detect what section we're on and how to determine what's active. And this is all going to come along in jQuery. So if you're not using jQuery in your project, then you might want to make these all the same color, and we won't distinguish for the user which section they're actually going to be on. So all of this and how to do all of this is coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, I want to update the form and how it's being presented on our website, so it doesn't really look in line with the rest of the content. So let's take a look at form and make some updates to that. So we just had a really simple, straightforward form here, and there's not really a lot of elements here that we've set up yet. So let's take a look at this and start setting up some different options here within the elements where we can really begin to style out this form. So we have our form tag there, so we can use that as our main point of connecting to our HTML. Next, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to give it a class of row. And then within here, I'm going to apply a label. So we may or may not need to use it. So for and given an ID of name, so I have to equal. And then I have to tie that text field back into this. So we're going to label for name is going to be name. Close off the label. And here we have to give it a name of, you guessed it, name. And we can also even add some placeholder content in there. So enter name. And so this is the format that we're going to use on the other ones. So to save some time, I'm going to just update that one, remove that one. So type is going to be email. Name is going to be email. Placeholder is enter email. For email. And then lastly, let's just create another row here for the button so that we can break apart all of this content here, and we don't really need to apply anything else there. So let's take a look at this, and now we've got our labels and some content and etc. So now we can apply some styling to our form. So let's open up our CSS. And typically forms would go into the top level. So depending on if you wanted to really isolate out and have a whole bunch of different looking forms, but for the most part your form is probably going to be very similar if you're using multiple forms. So in this case I've only got the one form, so I'm going to set some values here. I'm going to give it a max width, so I don't really want to take up way too much space, so maybe 800 pics could be a max width. I can add in a border around there. So 1 pix solid, and we're going to make it another really light border, and add in some padding there. So 20 pix padding and border radius. So I do like that border radius. So let's do 20 pix. I think that's consistent with other border radiuses. We're also going to transform the label. So whenever the label tag is used, let's transform that to display block, so it takes up its own section, its own line of code, and give it a width of 100%, just to make sure that it is taking up that full available line. And let's text align. So text align, and we're going to left align it, that text. So let's see what we got now when we refresh the page. So a little bit better. So we've got our labels there at the top. We still need to add in some spacing between all of these elements, some more padding. We did give them classes of rows. So here we can distinguish what we're doing with the rows. So the rows might have a margin, and we could do margin at the top and bottom of 20 pix. Left and right could be auto. So let's see what that looks like. So that gives us some more spacing there. We can also add in spacing around the label. So margin, and we could keep a margin at the bottom. So 10 pix. There's quite a lot of options here how you can play around with this to really update it the way that you want it to look. Let's also do our input and give it a width of 100%. So have it go all the way across. Or maybe that might be a little bit too much. So let's make some adjustments here. So let's add in some padding, so 0, and we can do maybe 50 pix. So we got to be careful as well that when we resize that we're not making it too much issue of this. So this padding is actually being applied to the cell. So I want to actually have that padding here on the row itself. And for the input, so we could do text. And let's do our text size. Or it should be font size, sorry about that. So font size. So we can nice and easily enter in some nice font sizes there. And also let's update and take care of that button. So we had type of button there. So maybe all of our buttons, we want to apply some styling to that. So do some padding there. Do font size and so on. So that really stands out. So again, there's quite a lot you can do with this, and you're welcome to try this out and play around with it and see what you can make happen within your code. So also, if you want to center that form, we can do that as well. So we can identify it down here at contact. So a number of different options here to center it. Probably the quickest would be just to add margin, just like we centered the main content, where we could do margin and we could set top and bottom to 0 and left and right to auto. So that won't actually center this contact, so you might want to add that in under here. So it all depends on how you want to style it. So let's take a look at that. And all I did was move that contact information in there. And it still left us some space for some additional information as well. So in the next lesson, we're going to start adding in some dynamic capabilities by adding in jQuery into our website design. So that's coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, we're going to add in some dynamic functionality into our website by adding in jQuery. So what jQuery is, it's a JavaScript library, and I'm just going to go over to hosted libraries from Google, and I'm going to pick up a link to bring in the source code, the jQuery minified source, and this way I can utilize it within my projects without actually having to download jQuery and set it up on my website. So there's different ways to bring jQuery in. So you could do this way, or you could link to a library, or you could download it and set it up on your website. So either way, as long as you're getting that jQuery code set up on your page, this is what we're looking to do. So now let's start working with our jQuery. And the way that jQuery works is it really gives us a great way to interact with our web content within our HTML page, and we can interact with any one of our web elements. So in order to activate and to access jQuery functionality, we want the web page to load. So that's where we add in this function. So you might also see it brought in as document ready. Essentially, this is doing the same thing as whenever your web page has finished loading, then now we know that we need to run, or we can run, our jQuery code. And that jQuery code is just going to sit in the middle here. So let's add in some of our jQuery code. And with jQuery, it makes creating triggers and events really easy to do. So if I wanted to trigger off anything within the navbar, any hyperlinks that are clicked, the same way that I would access our CSS, I can access it via jQuery. So start out with the $sign to identify that this is an object or a container, and we're going to select out nav A. So we're going to pick up any element that matches this pattern within our HTML, and we're going to apply on click functionality. So whenever anybody clicks it, we fire off this function. And then the contents of the function are going to be available here, and then we close off that function. So let's, I think I added in one too many. So this is our function here, all ready to go. So I add a colon there as well, just to break that up a bit. So let's console log out every time it's fired off, clicked. And I need to update this. This is why I'm having an issue here, because I didn't spell script right. So it should be script, and this should be closing script. And now that's, okay, so that's functioning better. So let's go take a look at and see what's actually happening on our web page. And to see the console, we can do this within Google Chrome. Same way that we got that, all of those elements here, we can see that within the console whenever we click it. And I'm going to bring that console back onto the page. So we see that it's going clicked. And we have an option to put it at the bottom. We have an option to hold it over to the right-hand side, so it's probably better to put it on the right-hand side. So we see that every time we click it, we're firing off and we're triggering off a message in our console. So now we've got our event handlers up and running. So now it's just a matter of creating that functionality where we're actually going to scroll to a certain point on the web page. So what we need to do is we need to know what was clicked, some information about these items that were clicked, and this will help us better understand where we want to move and where we want to scroll to. So all of this is coming up in the next set of lessons. In this lesson, we're going to update our jQuery, and we're going to use jQuery to determine where each and every one of these sections, as we click the different elements, where the section is located, and that we're going to use then to automatically animate and scroll down to a particular section. So let's take a look at our code that we were looking at initially with jQuery, where we had brought jQuery into our website, and we saw that whenever we click, we can trigger this event and we can find out information about the object that actually triggered that event. Let's go back over here, and one thing that we do need to add in, we need to prevent a default function from firing off, so we can get all of that event information as an event object, and here I'm going to do event prevent default. And what this is going to do is it's going to prevent the default triggering of that automatic trigger where whenever we click that, we actually move to that particular location. So whenever we remove the default, then nothing is going to happen now whenever I hit these anchor texts. So another thing that we do want to do to pick up here is we want to pick up the location of where we're trying to send out this the click to. So let's take a look at that and get the section. So this is the section that we're trying to go to, so maybe we'll just get the section ID, and we can use it, we can do it within this way. We're using this, and we can get an attribute and get the value of href. And I'm going to output this in the console, just like what we did before. So we can take a closer look and see actually what's happening when we are triggering these effects. So back out to our web page. Now let's click the menu items here, and we can see that we're automatically triggering to go to the different sections, but it's no longer responding because we don't have that in place where we're actually moving the default action of moving to the particular section. So now we need to add that back in, and adding it in with jQuery gives us a whole bunch of options as well. So we do need to make some calculations before we continue, and we have to calculate out where that section is located from the top of the page. So this will give us a value in pixels, how far down that particular section is located, and that will give us an idea of how far down we need to make our movement of our web page. So we'll just call this sec top to get a calculation of how far off it is from the top. We saw that we got that section ID there, and we can utilize that value by placing it in like that, and there's a built-in calculation here to calculate the offset value. So get the coordinates of the first element or set of coordinates of every element in the set, and so we're going to automatically offset from the top because we don't need the entire entirely from the bottom and from the other ones. We just need to get that value from the top. And so basically what's happening now, so I'm going to place that in there, and let's refresh it. And so now we can see that each one of these sections, it has a different location from the top. And now all we need to do is animate and move our scroll bar, scrolling our page to the correct section. So this is, again, built-in functionality within jQuery, and it's really making it really easy to add this type of functionality. So we need to specify, just like we do with CSS, just like we did over here, which element we want to apply this to. So we want to apply it to the entire HTML, to the entire body, and what we want to happen is animate. So animate performs custom animation of CSS properties and makes adjustments and calculations to them. So this is something I'm gonna show you within the console as we're doing our animations and as we do our movement, that we're going to see that the CSS is automatically going to be adjusting, and this is all going to be done via jQuery. So where we want to animate it to, we want to scroll to the top, and as you can see there's a bunch of options there as well in order to really customize different pretty cool effects. And this is the value of, this is the position where we want to scroll it to. And then we need another parameter there, and this is how quickly we want to do the scroll. So initially, maybe we want to do the scroll fairly slowly, so 5,000 milliseconds, which is equal to 5 seconds. So now our scrolls are going to take 5 seconds to reach that place, and I believe we've got our About Me section here. So we see that now we're scrolling over to a different section, and we've got our product section here, and there's automatically we can see that we're getting properties from it, and it's automatically scrolling that down. So we see that positioning of the scroll is automatically dynamically adjusting and moving the entire scroll position to wherever we've selected it. Now obviously this isn't ideal, and we want to make it a little bit quicker, so let's change this to 1 second and refresh and try this again. So now whenever we click it, we get a little bit quicker scrolling, and of course you can adjust this to whatever works best for you. And this is how easy it is to make jQuery add some dynamic capabilities into your web pages. So another thing that we're looking at and that we had talked about in our initial design is that we wanted these pages to update. So depending on the section that we're in, we want to dynamically update. So we see that right now it's stuck on home, and that's because our active class within our nav is sitting on home. So let's take care of that in the next lesson using jQuery. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to update classes dynamically using jQuery. So ideally what we want to happen is, depending on where the scroll bar is located, where it's sitting, we need to make some calculations to determine what section of our web content the user is looking at, and we want to update these accordingly. So we want them to update, add, and remove the active class as we scroll through the different pages. So let's open up our editor, and this is going to be jQuery again, so I'm going to remove that out because we no longer need to look at that one, and we're going to create a brand new function here. So this is the window object, and we can fire this off every time scroll happens within the web page. So essentially whenever the web scroll is moving, we're going to fire this off. So let's create a variable here to calculate our scroll position and determine where the user is located on the website or the web screen. And we're going to use window, and we're going to get a value from scroll top. So let's console log this out. So every time we move, we're going to know actually which position from the top where the user's view is. So let's see how this turns out. So now when we scroll, we see we know where the position is. So now it's a matter of making a comparison, checking to see if this value and which section we're sitting in. And we can see here that as we automate the scroll, we're getting all of those values popping up and dynamically changing there. So this will also work when the user presses these buttons, because it doesn't matter who's initiating the scroll, if it's the jQuery or if it's the user, we're still getting these calculations and this is still firing off. So let's open up our editor again, and now we need to make some calculations with our scroll position. So we're going to see if the scroll position, so using that object value, we're going to check to see if the value of it is larger than 100, because we don't want to be adjusting the scroll if the user just touched the top position. So now let's take a loop through. So jQuery also allows us to really easily loop through different elements. So we know that we've got this ID of main, and we've got a bunch of sections in there. So that's how we're identifying them, and this is how we're going to pick them up in jQuery as well. So we're going to use the hash to indicate that it's an ID, same as we do with our CSS. So section, and we're going to loop through each and every one of them, and we're going to simply return back a value. So we're going to do a function of x, so pass in that argument, because we're going to utilize this this value to determine where the position is and how we can apply the different styling to it, so adding the classes and so on. So now we're going to loop through and pick up all those positions. So let's console log this out so that we can see where we're located. So we're going to log out x. So x has a position of So we're going to plus sign that and do the position value. So that's this position top. So this is going to return back a number of where X is located. So this is going to give us a whole bunch of information there. So we see that we've got 0. So the first section is at 540. The second section is 1599, and we have it repeated. So this gives us the parameters that we can do the actual check to see where the user is actually located. So we know if the user is in 2548, we can check to see if it's greater than this and less than this, and if it is, then we know that this is our scroll position. And these are the top positions, so we can see that if it's less than or equal to the scroll position, then we can add and remove the classes, and if it's not equal to that or not less than, then we can update those classes. So let's take a look at this and open up our editor and make an update of this. So first of all, what I want to do before I even do anything here is I want to actually remove all of the active classes. And this again in jQuery is super easy. We just need to identify the element that we want to interact with within our web page. So this is going to be nav A, and we were looking for active class on the anchor. So nav A dot active. And we want to remove the active class. So we want to remove class. So we need to just specify the class name, and that's active. So this is going to remove out the active class from all of those navigation items. So now we need to determine where we're located and add in the class. And we can do this by using jQuery again and specifying the class. So we need to write a condition here to check to see where we're located, to see if our position is within that where we're looking at for the element. So this is where we're going to use the value of scroll position. Instead of console logging out the scroll position, and I'm gonna just show you this, and then we can make our calculations. So essentially now every time I scroll, we see our scroll position, and we see where it compares to the particular element. So in jQuery, we're going to use a specific function that's, again, a built-in function where we're able to identify a particular element via the index value. So we know that we've got a bunch of them here, and what we would need to do is do a condition here to see if our values are matching, and if they do, then we're going to apply this particular value to that matching element. So in order to better demonstrate this, we're going to be using this value here, and we're just doing a condition to see if this value is equal to or less than or equal to the value of our current scroll position. Then we know that we have a hit on this, and we know that we can, at this point, we can add the active class to it. And whenever we update the active class, it's just going to go along. So I'm going to show you how that works. So any of the nav A, and we're just going to do it on the equivalent pointer. What EQ does is it allows us to reduce the matched elements and bring it into one specific index, and we've got our index value right over here as we're looping through them. So this makes it easy enough to add it in EQ X. So this will return back and add the class to the specific index point, and we're going to be adding in active. And I'm going to move this one over, and I'm going to show you why we actually have to remove the classes. So let's take a look at this now, and we see that as we're scrolling down, we're seeing that it actually is adding the active classes, but it's adding them to all of them that are less than that certain point. And we can also add in a different condition here, but we don't actually know where this position is until we loop through it. So we can make an array of those and make some comparisons, but the easiest way is to simply remove out that active class on all of them every time, And that way, whenever we've got the last one that we're hitting, we're making sure that we've got that active class added into there. So now as I scroll through here, we can see that the menu items are changing and they're fluctuating depending on where we scroll. So even if we hit the automated scroll via jQuery, we see that we've got all of these are lighting up as the website scrolls through the different pages. And so essentially this is the objective that we want to accomplish with our navigation bar, where we can easily update the active class on each and every one of these elements. So in the next lesson, we're going to update and make a few other tweaks and updates to the website in order to complete this project, and also going to show you some other tricks and tips. In this lesson, we want to cover off how we can update our fonts and our background images. And adding in different types of fonts within your web page can really bring a lot of customization into your web project. So we're going to go over to Google Fonts, which is available at fonts.google.com, and they have 808 different font families for us to choose from. And we can really easily bring any one of these font families or combinations of these font families into our web project. So if I want to update my web fonts for my web project to this one here, so I'm just picking one here at random, make my selection, I can click it, and it opens up several different options to bring it into my web project. So I do have the option to import it directly into my style sheet. So this is my preferred way of bringing it in. You can also bring it into your page just as you would any other CSS file by using a standard link within your HTML, or you could import it directly into your CSS. So I'm going to bring that over and add that directly in my CSS and add it right at the top so I can see that what I'm importing. And now to utilize those fonts, all I need to do is just select font family and use the specific font family. So I'm going to use this font family across my entire website, and now when I refresh my page, my new font is there and ready to go. And as you can see, it's quite a dramatic change from the previous font, that just by simply updating that one source resource for fonts. The other thing that I want to do in this lesson as well is look at the backgrounds. So in a previous lesson we had deactivated some of the background images, so I'm going to bring them back into the picture. Also, I might want to also customize some of my backgrounds, so maybe for my contact page, if I want to have a custom background for that, so I can add that in as well. So we'll do contact, and we'll just do a background color here. And of course this is all being shown to me from brackets, so I can simply click and select the different colors that I want to utilize. Now when I go out to my website, let's check this out. So my contact page now looks like this, my products page looks like that, and then I've got my background images in place. And also I might want to make my header a little bit bigger. This again, these are optional things that you can do within your website. I might even want to curve round the edges, so let's do that quickly. Let's do the radius. So we've used radius in a few different options here, so let's do the radius of the sections, and going over to where we had set the different section properties here within our CSS. So going back down, and we've got it over here, main section, so I can just simply add border radius. So let's refresh that and see how this looks now. So depending on if you want to do it this way or not, so now it's in style with the other elements that we have within our web page, so it's make more of a uniform look where it is rounded. So it does present itself a little bit better. We might also want to add in some margins and paddings between the different sections, so we can do that as well. So we already have padding, so let's add in margin, and we're going to do a margin at the bottom. So we'll do maybe 20 pixels at the bottom, and this will give us some separation between the different sections within our website, and it's not going to mess up our code because we are putting it at the bottom. If we put it at the top, we could potentially mess up some of our calculations for the scroll, so we definitely don't want to do that. And we've got it fairly well, so it looks fairly consistent here with the other elements as well. And there's a number of other effects that we can add in as well. So maybe for the products, maybe we want to do a box shadow instead of these borders. So maybe that looks a little bit better. So let's take a look at that, where we set up our products inline. So we've got our border there, but let's do a box shadow as well. So this will give us a 3D effect. And it takes several parameters here. So maybe we'll do 10 pixels by 10 pixels, and we'll do another 10 pixels. And then here we need to enter in a color of our shadow. So usually, typically, you're going to do a fairly dark color. And let's save that and see what that looks like. So now when we go to the products, we've got this shadow effect. This might be something you like, might be something you don't like, depending on how you want to create your code. I also want to add in a margin at the top, so margin top, and give it 10 pixels there. So that will move that down. So create a little bit of spacing so we can better see these shadows. So again, depending on what you want to do and where you want to apply these shadows, it's all up to how you want to style your website. We can even do some shadows underneath all these articles as well, so have that kind of pop out and stand out from our web page, maybe even the contact form. So I'm going to copy this shadow format and go over to where I set my form and save that, and let's go back to the web page and do one more refresh and check out how this turned out. So it stands out a little bit nicer, and it's a really nice effect now with the CSS3 that we can create all of these nice properties that are now available within our CSS styling options. So in the next lesson, we're going to add in some icons here for social connections within our web pages. So that's coming up in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to go over how we can add in some really nice social icons. Now, social icons these days are a must-have within your website. And the really good thing about them is they're easily recognizable, and users are going to tend to click them. So usually, at least within your footer, you should have some social icons. Sometimes you'll find them in a header. Sometimes people will float them in a bar alongside. So there are a number of different ways to add these in. So in this case, I'm going to just add it in the footer. And I'm going to be using a resource called Font Awesome. And the good thing about Font Awesome is it's got a lot of different fonts that you can really utilize within your web pages. So we have some options here. We can download and customize it, and then we just link to the path, or we can link to the CDN, and there's some more advanced options down here as well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm linking to the CDN of Font Awesome. So it's available at Bootstrap CDN, and these are my options here. So I'm going to just bring it into HTML. So this is a simple copy and paste. Bring my styling into here. And now I have access to a whole bunch of really nice, cool icons that we can use. So we can go over here and we can do a quick check to see all the different icons. So if we want to connect out Facebook, you can see that we've got a number of options for Facebook. Usually I like to use this Facebook official one. There's also Facebook Square and so on. So I'm going to just use the Facebook official. Once you click on the icon, you can just simply copy and paste that source code in. And let's go down here within our footer, and we're going to create a social icon box. So just below here, where we've got our copyright information, let's have a div. And this div is going to contain a number of hyperlinks. So href. And for now, we're not going to link it out. But of course, before you go live, you should set this up as your social profile. And maybe I can have a class of social so I can really easily identify these icons. So this is for Facebook. And we should also add in the other ones as well. So we've got our Facebook there. We've probably got a Twitter, maybe a LinkedIn, maybe Pinterest. So I'll add in 4 different ones. So whenever I go out to the web page, let's go take a quick peek and see what this looks like now. So see, we've got a whole bunch of the Facebook icons there. And the reason I linked it in social is this gives me the opportunity now to change the size of the fonts. So I can really easily do like a social, and I can do font size, and now I can give it a fairly big size so that it really stands out. And we can also add in additional styling if we choose to do so as well. So let's pick up the Twitter one. So the same thing I'm doing here, all I'm doing is doing a search. So we've got our Twitter square, Twitter. So Twitter doesn't have an official one, but let's just use this Twitter one here for our Twitter icon. And also maybe we want to look at Pinterest. So let's pop back here and look at Pinterest and at LinkedIn. So the Pinterest square, so we'll keep it in line, and LinkedIn, and we'll just do the LinkedIn square as well. And these are the 4 that I'm going to use within this lesson, but of course there are a lot of different ones to choose from at this point as well. So that was the Pinterest square, and now let's just grab the LinkedIn. So these are probably the more commonly used ones. You might also be using G+. So this is another common link that people would have on their web pages. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. So now I've got all of my social icons there, and they're still being colored just as any other link. So we can make some updates to social here if we want to color and style them differently. So the blue right now, it's working pretty good. Maybe we want to change the color to, let's just change it over to black. And then over here, just as we did over here with the hover, I'm going to add in an option here for hover. And whenever it gets hovered, then we'll update the color. So this, maybe we'll just turn it blue or something like that. And we can even make it even bigger so it really stands out. So now let's see what this looks like. So now these are social icons. Whenever we hover over them, they're indicative that they're going to actually link to something. So now it's just a matter of getting our social link URLs and adding them in the hyperlinks there. And we're all ready to go with social. So in the next lesson, I'm going to finalize this by bringing it into CodePen, and I'm going to show you how you can work with CodePen to continue to customize out this source code. So that's coming up in the next lesson. This lesson, I want to show you how we can customize out our source code. So we do have Google's Chrome, and we can inspect elements here, and just by inspecting elements, so let's say we've got our header here and we didn't like this color beige, so we have an option here to see what it looks like in multiple different colors, and simply by we can even have a color picker here. We can adjust the gradient as well, or the alpha. So we've got a lot of different options to really pick that correct color and pick our correct color scheme. And then once we have our color selected, we have a nice option here with a box where we can pick out our color, because of course this isn't going to be saved. If you refresh the page, then it's going to default back to the old colors. You do have an option within Chrome to set up and save, customize your dev tools. So you can actually have an option here where you can save it onto your desktop or access the desktop file and then make changes and save it as well. So that's a really nice feature with Chrome, but typically I don't do a lot of that. I would typically go in and I would make some adjustments within the CSS just to see how it looks like, and just make note of that and then bring that into my my web project manually. So even if the border, if I didn't like the border, I can get rid of that and I guess it does look better without the border, so I probably would get rid of that. I probably would use a different color. We could even bring the padding down and so on. So we've got a lot of options here to play with. We can also see the box model here. So on any element, we've got a margin, border, padding, and the content width. So we can make adjustments on those. We can update the background color. We can do border bottom colors and make a whole bunch of really nice updates here. And this is available for any part of our website. So if we'd like to update the articles, we can make our updates there and so on. So a lot of different options. We can turn the font on and off as well. So we can really get a better sense of what we want our website to look like. So the other option that I more commonly use is I'll use a resource like CodePen, and then this is something that you could see live happening right away. So when you make your updates, you can see what your source code looks like. This advantage here is that this is, if you've got a free account, this is going to be available to the public. So that is something to keep in mind. So with when it comes to CodePen, first of all, the HTML is just looking for the body content. So all I need to do, or all you need to do, is copy and paste it in. And then we see what the web page looks like without any of the CSS. And now we can go over and grab our CSS and bring that into our project as well. And I like to tidy that up. So now we can see what it looks like with the styling, but we still don't have our JavaScript added in. And that's easy enough. We just go down here at the bottom and add in the JavaScript. And you're going to see there's going to be an issue that's going to pop up here. So, and I'm going to show you how to add in the libraries as well, because we don't have the libraries added in as of yet. So we click here for this, this icon here, and we can quickly add in jQuery. And there's a number of different libraries that we can easily bring into our web project simply by clicking them. And if your library isn't here that you want to utilize, you can always add in the URL of the library. So this makes it nice and easy to simplify and add in your jQuery when you need to. And now just tidy that up. And now we'll see that looks like we're still having some issues there. So one of the other things too that I want to add in, so we notice that we don't have those social icons showing up. So this is something that we can add in as well. So let's take care of that. And we want to add in the Font Awesome library, so we need that to function. And so this is a CSS library, so it's probably, well, it's not there, but we can add it in within this type of format. And we can save that. And it looks like there's still an issue here with our jQuery. So let's take a look at why that's giving us an issue. So I think I've copied it incorrectly. So let's go back down and make sure that, oh, I forgot to copy the function. So let's just make sure that we copy it properly and tidy it up. And now it looks like everything should be working. So just a quick check, and we do see that it is fully functional, and it looks just like our project. And from here, now we can make our updates. So if we want to update our font, we can update our background as well. So background color, and we can make it a grayish color if we choose. And we're available. We've got quite a few different options presented to us at this point. So I also did want to get rid of that border around the heading, so easy enough to do. So just going down to the header area and get rid of that border there. And also maybe we could do a different background color. So inspect element. So these values are going to be available until I actually refresh the page. So they're not going to disappear until I actually refresh the page. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So if I did want to use the color, it's as easy as this to add in and utilize that color. So there we go. So this is our website. brought into CodePen, and now we can play around with the source code and customize it to make different effects and to move elements around within our web page. Now that we've come to the conclusion of our project, of course, with CSS and with styling and web design, there's always more that you can do to any web page. You can really get fine-tuning with some of the customizations in the CSS. So take a good look around your website. Always make sure that you test your website, you test all of the links, just to ensure that it's working properly. Open up different browsers as well. This is the same website in Firefox. So just to make sure that everything is fully functional, because some of the browsers, they do render out content differently, CSS differently, as well as JavaScript. So you got to be mindful of the fact that it might not work across all browsers. So always take a look through and just make sure everything is functioning the same way across different browsers. Make sure that you take a look on a mobile screen. Make sure that you're good for small devices as well as for larger devices. So make sure that everything is functioning and working as you're expecting it to on different size devices as well. So we've got our different phone sizes here by default within Chrome that we can really easily access. So we can make it bigger and smaller, and we can make customized responsive sizes. So these are all things that we can update within our web page, and I'm just noticing that we should do a quick update because when I do resize it, when it's this size, when it's under 700, maybe I should remove out some of the sizing here for the different elements here. So we had our 100 pix width here for the nav A. So the way I usually like to do, just to copy it over, bring it down here, and then remove out all of the ones that we don't need to touch. So I can remove out background color, center, float left, decoration. So I can remove out all of those, and I might want to make some adjustments here. So this one I'm gonna just do, I'll do a max width here, and we might want to do a max width of 25%. We'll see how this turns out. So when we refresh it and we shrink it down, and it's still handling it, so maybe we want to get rid of the margins on the left, so change that to 0, and padding, we might want to move that to 0 as well, and let's refresh that. So now we see that our navigation menu is working slightly better. It is getting really small, so maybe I don't want to get rid of that padding there on the top. So maybe I want to keep my 10 pix on the top and bottom, but remove the left and the right. So as you can see, there's always stuff that could use adjusting. So that was just one of the things that kind of stood out on me. But of course, go through your website, try it out on different size screens, make sure that everything looks the way that you want it to look, and then you can go ahead and launch your web project. So use different resources. We've listed out all of the source code and resources used within this course as well. So you have access to that, and you can take a look around and build up on that as well.